And I'm actually starting to realize how affordable Lethbridge is now. Because when you're living here, you just like, this is your world. And you just like, oh yeah, this is what it's like everywhere. It's not. Ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of YQL Real Talk, where we talk all things related to living in Lethbridge and the Lethbridge real estate market. My name is Kurtis Hawkins, and I'm a realtor at lethbridgerealestate.com, located right here in Lethbridge, Alberta. This podcast is produced and moderated by my beautiful wife, Chelsea, and she's helped me with all of my marketing so far, all of my YouTube videos, if you haven't seen those before, and just all my content. Chelsea has a marketing degree from the University of Lethbridge, which is actually how we met. Chelsea, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
I think that's saying probably more than enough about me, but yeah, Kurtis and I actually met at the college where we were both taking our business degrees, and then we moved over to the University of Lethbridge. We both graduated with different business degrees. Kurt took a general business degree, and I took marketing, and I've worked in marketing for basically the last decade now, which sounds crazy to me. And now I help Kurtis with all of his content. I'm typically the one, if you haven't seen any of Kurtis's home tours, I'm typically the one who's behind the camera filming all of those and planning out his content, things like this beautiful podcast.
So we've been together now for nearly 10 years, and we've not tried to. I think it's come pretty naturally, but we've made Lethbridge our home. And we've been super grateful towards Lethbridge because it has afforded us a lot of opportunities. And I think had we moved to a different city, our opportunities would have been much different. So we're very happy that Lethbridge has provided all these opportunities for us, which we'll kind of talk about later in the episode. Just a bit about us, since this is kind of the intro to this podcast. We have a couple.
Don't worry, we won't talk about ourselves all the time. This is just the intro episode.
It is very awkward talking about yourself all the time. We do have a couple rental properties in Lethbridge. We've lived and built a brand new house. We've lived in a older 2000s house that was suited. And we're currently living in a condo right now in Lethbridge, and we're about to move out into not a new house, but another semi-detached house. Fully detached house. We're moving into our first fully detached house, which we're excited about. So I think we've lived in every single type of house that you can in Lethbridge, other than probably an old folks home.
Don't worry, we'll be there soon enough, so...
And we've kind of done this, it was kind of by accident, but also it's kind of, now that we're looking at it, being a realtor, it's kind of cool that we've been able to live in all these different places so that you have the experience when you're helping clients.
So do you want to elaborate a little bit more on these houses and like how we started in real estate? Because I do think that these are some of the best decisions that we've made in our lives. And now our lives are centered so much around real estate. So why don't you elaborate a little bit more on how it all started?
Sure. So the first house we actually bought was a house out in Colehurst that was illegally suited. And we lived in the basement and rented the upstairs. And the entire time people were like, why in the heck are you living in the basement of your own house? Why are you renting out the upstairs? And at the time we were still in university. We weren't making a lot of money. So we figured the best way to justify getting a house was to live in the basement and rent the upstairs out for more money, which paid for almost all of our living expenses, which was awesome. And we got pretty used to having our living expenses covered. So when we graduated, we built a new house on the west side in Gary Station, and that house was legally suited. At the time, we thought it was very expensive to build. And now looking back, we wish we bought about 10 of them.
Not that we could have ever afforded to at that point in time, but man, it feels like a missed opportunity.
Yeah. So we built that legally suited house, and in that one we rented the basement and we lived in the upstairs, and we also kept the Colehurst house because we were used to having our living expenses covered. So by moving into this one, we could take some revenue from the first house and from the basement of the house in the west side and put that all towards our expenses. So we pretty much kept our living expenses the same, even though we had two houses, which was awesome. And then during COVID, we moved into the condo that we're in right now, and it was a bit of a fixer-upper, to put it lightly. This place needed a ton of work, and we did do a lot of work to it over COVID. there was nothing else better to do. So we thought, why not get a project on our hands?
I can think of a lot of things better to do than spend that many months or weeks renovating, but it was
But
worth it. It was worth it.
there literally was nothing to do over COVID. So we couldn't really do much, especially in the winter. We did this all in the winter too. So it worked out good.
We were on full lockdown at this point in time, so my parents actually moved in with us for 6 weeks while we did this. So a shout out to Bob and Caroline for helping us with all the renos.
Yes.
Among many other things.
They taught us a lot, and they did help us a lot with the reno. So that was very appreciated. And finally, in 9 days' time, Chelsea, I think in 9 days' time, we are now moving back to the west side in our first detached house that we've ever lived in. We don't have any condo neighbors. We don't have any renters below us. We don't have any renters above us. So we're very excited about that. It took us 10 years to be able to get there. I mean, we could have done it sooner, but again, once you get used to not having those expenses on your income statement or whatever you want to say, it's really hard to just go and get a single family home, in my opinion. I'm sure everybody does it out there, but it's really hard for me to fork up a whole mortgage payment now. So it took us a long time to work our way up to getting our first single family detached home. That's not going to cost us our full mortgage payment because we just don't do that.
When I look back at it and when you say it like this all in a row, I see the sacrifices that we made. It didn't feel like crazy sacrifices at the time, which is obviously a relief. Like, that's a good thing. I would say that the way that we did it, it's never covered all of our living expenses, but if we would have had to have paid rent to live in something similar, we were living there for at least half the cost.
Yeah, and at least a quarter of what our mortgage cost would be.
Yeah.
Our goal was always to try to get zero living expenses. Not as easy as it seems.
No.
Unless you really want to sacrifice, which I think we've done a good job of balancing both sacrificing things and still living a very nice lifestyle. I mean, the biggest benefit that it's given us is that we've had the opportunity to travel a ton because we have super low living expenses. So we want to keep that up. So enough about us. Should we actually get into the actual meat of the podcast, which is affordability in Lethbridge? How affordable is Lethbridge? Is it affordable?
Well, I think the examples that you just said already dictate that. I think that because Lethbridge is affordable, we were able to do these things, and had it been a much more expensive place, I'm not saying that these things wouldn't have been achievable, they would, but it definitely would have been a lot harder.
We would have had to have a lot more money or a lot higher income to do this in Vancouver, or been born like 40 years ago. And I'm actually starting to realize how affordable Lethbridge is now, because when you're living here, you just like, this is your world, and you just like, oh yeah, this is what it's like everywhere. It's not, and I'm really getting an eye-opener because over the past year, I've helped a ton of clients through the YouTube videos and all the content that I do. It's mostly people from out of town that have been seeing it, which I find kind of odd, super grateful, but I'm just surprised that more Lethbridge people haven't been paying attention to it as much. But outside of Lethbridge, the content is doing really well. And I've been helping a ton of people from BC and Ontario move to Lethbridge. So I'm starting to see Lethbridge through their eyes, and seeing it through their eyes is an eye opener. It's crazy to hear when, there's a family that's our age, if not slightly older, that's moving from BC or Ontario. And they bought their house out there for like $600,000 at the time, like 5 years ago, which is still pretty expensive. And especially if, like, what I would say the comparable house here is like $350,000 to $400,000 today. Back then, so maybe 5-6 years ago, they bought it for $600,000, and now over COVID, they were selling them for $1.2 million. Like, imagine being a first-time home buyer and you're buying. Picture a Lethbridge home at $350,000, and imagine that was a sticker price of $1.2 million, and having to pay for that. Like, it would be absolutely terrifying, and it would be so hard to get ahead there.
It seems unattainable to me when I picture us being able to afford a $1.2 million house. Like, what will we have to do? What will we have to change?
With us having somebody live in the upstairs of our house, even having that, I'm sure rents are higher. I know they're higher there, but I don't know if they're high enough to cover an expense of a mortgage of $1.2 million on a single family detached house. So then when I see these clients come to Lethbridge and they see the prices of our houses here, it's like for them, they've rewinded, like 10, 20 years, and they're seeing houses that are actually affordable and they can get their family into a nice home for a reasonable cost. Like everyone in Lethbridge right now is freaking out because prices have gone up so much and they're saying it's unaffordable, but in reality, it's not. And Chelsea's going to get mad at me for saying this because she's going to think it's too much of a real estate pitch. But I think everybody should be taking advantage of how cheap the real estate is. Not saying that you need to get into rentals, but you should at least be investing in your own single family detached home or condo or whatever it is. You should be owning the place that you're living in.
Not just house expenses, though, or the cost of a house dictates affordability too. I do think that we're very grateful for our overall cost of living in Lethbridge. And Kurt's mom actually lives in, that's considered the lower mainland of Vancouver, right? So she's moving to Lethbridge, hopefully, fingers crossed, because the conversation we had with her is that she felt nickeled and dimed by so many things in BC. The cost of gas, the amount that your commute is, all of these little things.
Yeah, gas right now in Lethbridge I think is $1.60, and I bet you it's over $2, if not just under $2 in BC. It's always like 30 cents higher for whatever reason. But the commute is another big one. Speaking of gas, people in Lethbridge like to complain. The residents here complain about living on, let's say, the west side and driving to Costco 20 minutes. And there was a snowstorm yesterday, and the bridge was pretty bad to get across. So there's like 1 to 3 times a year where it's kind of tough to get across that bridge. But when you're talking about somebody coming from BC or Ontario, it's normal for people to commute an hour one way to work. So after your 8-hour day, add on 2 hours of travel minimum without traffic.
Yeah. I actually owe people in our lives a genuine apology because we currently live on the north side of Lethbridge, and I really like it. I find it super convenient. I have really enjoyed living on the north side. And now we're moving back to the west side, and I was feeling really bitter about the drive and the hill. But I actually owe people an apology because I bragged about the north side being so much more closer to Costco and the south side amenities. But when I was talking myself into this west side house, I Google Maps from a Copperwood versus where we are now on the north side
To
Costco, and it was literally a 2-minute difference. I am complaining that I don't want to live on the west side over 2 minutes.
And I know there's some west sider or some north sider out there saying, no, it's way closer from me to Costco than that. But I'm not arguing with you. We're not driving this. Just Google it. Google's always right.
So when it comes to house prices and affordability in Lethbridge, I actually came up with a little game. I don't think that these numbers are going to surprise you, but I have a few kind of major cities in Canada, and I'm going to get you to guess the average house price from these places. So
This is either going to go really well or really poorly, because usually if somebody asks me stats, I like to be the most accurate as possible, so I'm always Googling them, and I don't like to memorize them, and I don't want to be wrong, so we'll see.
It's a guessing game. It's a game. Okay, so obviously, let's start with Lethbridge.
Okay.
Average house price. Or, sorry, these are actually median house prices, so right dead in the middle. I think that's what typically gets translated into average house prices on the media. And all of these numbers I got from the Real Estate Board of Canada.
Not the mode house prices, median?
Mode?
Median, mode, and average.
Wow, you are testing some.
I'm going to say, I don't know this exactly. I'm going to guess it's 350.
Lower than that. It's 342.
So, yeah, basically 350.
Okay. No. These numbers, like, we're getting accurate here, okay? These numbers. So 342.
Well, I didn't know we were playing Price is Right rules.
The closest
$1,
you without
Bob.
going over. The big shocker one. Well, the big shocker one. The big comparison. Toronto house.
Toronto median house price?
Yes.
I know they went crazy during COVID, and they probably come down a little bit now. So I'm still going to say 1.2 million.
Dead on. These numbers are actually, I tried to take the most recent number, so.
I don't know these answers, by the way. Must be good at this.
No, if you're watching this one on YouTube as opposed to the podcast, you'll see that Kurtis has actually moved his notes and show notes away from him. And
I didn't peek.
There's no cheating. Yeah, 1.2. And these numbers are based on like more recent stats. So I was looking for like September, October numbers, or talking about like the third quarter of.
Well, I'd hope so.
Hey, I'm going for accuracy here. Okay, Toronto apartment. I don't know if you know this one.
I don't know this one.
Yeah.
800.
A little bit lower than that, 759,900, so 760.
Wow,
But
reasonable.
760 for an apartment. When I think about my dream house, I don't even think would cost us 700. And
depends on the lot and when we actually buy our dream house, because in 10 years it probably will be that much.
Yes, don't remind me of that. Thanks for crushing my dreams. Okay, a Vancouver house price.
Detached.
Yeah, these are.
It's probably got to be. I'm gonna say 1.3.
No, it's actually less. 1.15 less than
really?
Toronto. Yeah.
Okay.
Apartment.
Well,
Vancouver apartment.
650 then.
Nope, 728. 728.
And what was Toronto?
Toronto was 760 and there's 728. I was actually surprised to find that Vancouver overall was slightly, like we're talking slightly, but slightly cheaper than
It's a deal. Move to Toronto.
No, move to Vancouver.
Oh yeah, Vancouver.
Okay, so I picked another one a little bit closer to home, Calgary. So median single detached house price in Calgary.
650.
572.
High.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it reassuring to be high? Does that make you feel better about Calgary house prices? I mean,
yeah, I should have known that because of usually when somebody's asking me what's the difference between Lethbridge and Calgary, I say it's usually $200,000 difference. So I should have known that.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty close.
$200,000 would have been.
Yeah.
And
that was a bad guess.
A Calgary apartment.
350.
243,500.
Yeah.
240,000.
I could see that.
I think that makes Calgary sound a lot more affordable than I thought it was.
Yeah.
I mean, Lethbridge is still literally hundreds of thousands of dollars under it, but
did you find average price for
an
apartments in Lethbridge?
No, that stat wasn't even on the website.
Yeah, there's not enough of them.
No, there aren't. Okay, so the median single detached house price for Saskatoon.
It's got to be similar to Lethbridge. I'm going to go 330.
373.
Higher than Lethbridge.
It's higher than Lethbridge.
Wow. Lethbridge is a deal. So let's go.
I haven't spent a lot of time in Saskatoon. When I have been there, it was nice. I think that the city is pretty. But I don't know a lot of people that are moving to Saskatoon or like moving deeper into the prairies. So I was shocked to hear that it was more expensive than Lethbridge.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds like a gem.
And then Winnipeg.
Oh, they've got to be cheaper than Lethbridge. 320.
390.
What is going on? I guess it's a bigger city. Like I think there's almost 1 million there.
Is there?
Yeah.
I didn't look at anything like that.
I think so. And they got an NHL team, so.
Again, they do have an NHL team, you're right.
Yeah.
It's been years and years and years. I went when I was little and I remember the city being pretty.
I've never.
But our vehicle got broken into in Winnipeg and like this was
classic.
Probably 15 plus years ago and I'm still bitter about it. So
I have never been, so I don't want to say anything about it. I never hear good things, but I'm not going to judge.
I know. So overall,
I can't believe out of all those cities that Lethbridge is still the cheapest.
And I promise I wasn't even trying to cherry pick cities that I thought.
Sorry, not the cheapest, most affordable. You tried to cherry pick?
No, I genuinely did not try to cherry pick what cities to make Lethbridge feel more affordable. I genuinely thought that Saskatoon and Winnipeg were going to be significantly less expensive. So those numbers surprised me as well.
Yeah, that is very weird. I mean, Lethbridge is. What about like Regina? How big's Regina?
I didn't look that one up. I'm sorry.
I had to look up some similar sized cities because those are all a little bit bigger. Even Saskatoon, I think, is 300,000. I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not.
It could. It definitely could.
Yeah, but you look at like anything around Calgary, like Airdrie is still. Prices in Airdrie are similar to Calgary still. Still nowhere near as affordable as Lethbridge.
I never hear. Lethbridge's proximity to Calgary is a huge selling feature to me because we're close enough to all of the amenities that the city has, but still keeps our cost of living low. When I think about like Saskatoon or Winnipeg, I don't hear the same amount of concerts and like experiences happening in those cities.
I'm sure they do.
When you look at a world tour,
Saskatoon. They're coming all the way to Saskatoon. I don't know.
Seems like
Seems like they
If
wouldn't, but
if there's anyone out there from Saskatoon,
We're
I'd
probably
love
being-
to hear more about your city. I'd love to hear all of the pros about it.
we're probably being ignorant to Saskatoon. I'm sorry.
It's not that far away. We can't be that
They
ignorant.
might have to go to Winnipeg. I bet you they go to Winnipeg. Anyway, I think that's enough about affordability. I think we're getting off track here. So thank you guys for tuning in to the first episode. We're planning on putting these out weekly. So this is a brand new podcast as well. So if you guys are so inclined and if you guys liked this podcast, if you could please rate it wherever you guys are seeing it, or if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this podcast. And if you could leave us a review anywhere, it would be greatly appreciated just so that we can get this out to more people. This is going to be a lot of work to put this out. So again, it would be greatly appreciated.
If you have any topics about Lethbridge that you'd like us to look into or discuss or want to know more about,
Or people you'd like to see on this podcast, you can send an email to Kurtis, Kurtis, .reddoorYQL@gmail.com. Or you can also give me a call, give me a text, 403-892-6991.
we'll leave all this information in the show notes down below as well, or in the description of the YouTube video.
And if you would like, we're also going to leave a link to all of my content that we kind of talked about earlier, all the YouTube videos, my Instagram, all that kind of stuff. So you guys want to follow along with this podcast and home tours, more information about Lethbridge. All those links will be down in the description below. Until then, we'll see you guys next week. Bye.